So let's talk a little bit about digital and this and this phenomenon that's been going on. And let me bore you with a few figures first, because we all know that the world's going online. And one of the things we want to talk about today is not just about the online world, but about the new way of going online, and that's mobile. So the growth of internet penetration is completely outstripped by the growth of mobile. And for a long time, a big chunk of that growth was in places like China and India, people buying their first Nokia. And so as an internet phenomenon, mobile was a little bit removed. But what we're seeing is this dramatic collapse in the price of entry-level smartphones. This data's from China, where we've been asking people, well, how much are you going to spend on your next phone? And you can see we're past that inflection point. And given the fact that purchase cycles are getting shorter and shorter in the mobile space, what this means is that that intention to spend money on a new mobile phone is very rapidly going to turn into a smartphone in people's back pocket. And we know that once they've got the right device, and once also pricing levels, interesting the comment about data consumption, which really restrained people from using their mobile device as an internet portal for a long time. And also in infrastructure, 3G and 4G rollout, we can see, if you like, going from the right to the left of this chart, that really starts to change behavior and people start to use those mobile phones beyond voice and into other areas. That's not to say that the emerging markets are completely dominated by voice, and that's something that Sifiso, I know, is going to pick up on later. We run the risk, as we put these smartphones in people's pockets, of just seeing it as another opportunity to communicate. And if we actually see the role that mobiles play in people's lives, yes, they are uber communicators, but of course they do much more than that. And if we're going to harness that power, we need to understand that and understand it at a very human level. I was in Delhi for a conference, and our local managing director, Nirja, was introducing a speaker from Nokia. And she said to those of us in the room who weren't local that if you see an Indian woman, she looks like this. And she held her mobile phone close to her. She said it's such a part of who they are, and it's, yes, a communication device, but so personal, so always on, the lifeline to their family. So, yes, it's a communication device, but it's a more personal one, a more always-on communication device than we've ever seen before. And if we use it as a communication device, we can use it, of course, in much more relevant and targeted ways. Here's an example from Shopkick, where people using this device in store, by walking into the store, they get rewards. By scanning particular items, they get rewards. So yes, communication, but communication in context, and also communication where the consumer's in control. But in fact, when we look beyond that to other uses, we see the kinds of benefits that consumers are getting from mobile devices really don't have much to do with communication at all. The idea of being able to do your shopping at the subway station in Singapore by scanning QR codes while you wait is all about convenience. It's all about how you use your time. And to say that's just a new communication device kind of misses the point and misses the value. And we'll talk a lot more about e-wallet, which we're seeing growing everywhere, people's expected use of e-wallet, and particularly in places like sub-Saharan Africa. To what extent is it communication to say that you can have an app in your pocket as a diabetes sufferer, which helps you control the intake of different foods and knowing when to take insulin and when you may be in a danger point? It's a liberating device, which again is a bit removed from what we would traditionally see as something that's there for communication. And then there's the whole concept of augmented experience. Some of you may have the app you see there on the right, the Skywalk, where you point your mobile phone at the sky and you can see which stars you're looking at. On the left is a more branded experience, where you scan the chocolate bar and you play a branded game. So yes, again, communication, but the consumer completely in control on their terms. They're not there as a target or a recipient of a communication message. And of course, then we look to the path to purchase and see that the mobile phone is radically disrupting the way that people shop. And the benefit here is more about reassurance, although it's not always reassuring to know that you can be in a store and check prices and check social media about the products you're about to buy. It's adding new layers of new layers of concern because people feel that there's a better price out there somewhere, and if I look hard enough for it, I'll find it. So mobile, if we see it as a communication channel, it can work for us. But I think seeing it as just the next step in communications may be the wrong paradigm. These are devices which are playing really intimate parts in people's lives, and we've got to understand the complexity and diversity of those, the needs, the gratifications, and recognize they're not at all the same for all different people. So if we're going to communicate through the mobile phone, we better be honing our age-old communication skills. I mean, let's think about the big idea first. And there has been a bit of a return to the idea of the big brand idea. But the question is, how do you pump a nice, big, fat, big idea through the fragmented world of media? How do you take your big message, your big concept, and pump it through very light touches, very lightweight interactions? Sometimes that happen frequently, but happen in lots of different contexts where you have no control over the timing. Brands need to exist in a glimpse, and perhaps the best example of the glimpse would be the app icon. You can see all of these apps, and there's not a letter or a word on the screen there. Your brand needs to work at this level of granularity. There are, I think, 7 different birds there that all mean very different things to us. One's about social media, one's about banking, one's about TripAdvisor. But if you're going to have a brand that works in a glimpse, you need to really sweat it. You need to sweat the details of communication, and you need to really understand how to design it. It's been great working with Martin Lambinaire, who helped us redesign our brand and has been working for TNS for the last 12 months. This was a brand that was built from the micro up. It had to be able to live in that glimpse and works very well. But this has really profound implications for how we build brands. We need to look at our brand architecture and say, is it working at that level? If you've got a brand that works great in a 30-second advert, it may not be a minor job to make it work at this level. And you're going to need to understand how humans work. You're going to need to understand some of the things Rory was talking about how the brain works, if you're going to be able to deliver a brand which works at that symbolic, non-verbal level. And when it comes to relevance, it looks like the perfect targeting vehicle. The scientists love the idea that the mobile phone, we know where they are, we know when it is. Targeting never got easier. Here's our happy target outside Starbucks. Yes, it's that time of day, and the app tells 50p off, so it's only going to cost you £3.50 to have a cup of coffee today. But maybe not. Maybe she's having a blazing row with, this is Nicola, our events coordinator, and you don't want to have a blazing row with her. Completely different context. Context is human. Context is about who you're with. It's about how you feel. It's about whether today's the day for your habitual behaviours, or maybe today's the day when you want to break the rules. There's a real concern that people see the targeting ability of the internet as a silver bullet and forget that more often than not, they can get it wrong. And if you're going to get it wrong, you need to work in a world where getting it wrong is part of what you do, and therefore that has profound implications for the tone of voice you use. This is an example from Interflora, looking for people having a bad day on Twitter and offering them a bunch of flowers. But it's not a hard sell, and they're not doing it in a way where that consumer can't say, actually, no thanks today. So profound implications for tone of voice. If you think that better targeting means you can be more direct, you should think again, because the science, frankly, isn't good enough. And the other way to get relevant is to work with your consumers. A great job description here. Establishing a systematic and disciplined approach to open innovation, particularly interesting to me, because co-creation, where better to co-create than at Lego, which is where this job was. I often say to my wife, I'm off to co-create with my 5-year-old son in Lego, and she comes and watches us. And he's at one end of the table doing his thing, and I'm at my end of the table doing my thing. And in fact, there's no co-creation going on at all. But there you have it. And all brands are doing this. Here's some examples from Ford and another example from Kraft. But we need to be, again, a bit careful about tone of voice. The first line of that Kraft co-creation website, we desire proprietary, commercially viable products. And Mr. Co-Creator, I imagine you want that too. Well, perhaps not, actually. Perhaps we ought to be thinking about the tone of voice in terms of how we co-create if we're going to be doing it effectively. And that's a very human concept. And then this point about being genuine, being trusted. Brands want to be trusted, and they have to be in this world of transparency. Trusted like you trust your best friend, right? That's how much trust you want. Well, don't brands normally live in a world where everything's rosy and they're best? It's a world removed from the world of actually building trusting human relations. And one of the big ways in which people build trust is they show weakness, not something brands are very good at doing. But Domino's Pizza did a great job when they saw on social media that people didn't like their crusts. And they said, rather than, well, let's drown out that message with our own messages, they said, you know what, they're not good enough, and we're going to build our pizzas again from the bottom up. That's the way you build trust, by showing you're not perfect. And you, of course, can do things in CSR. You can give money, you can help others, your consumers raise money for you for great charities. And that's great. It's nice to be nice. It's nice to offer people flowers, as Interflora does. But let's, again, think to Roy's point about intentionality, because altruism, frankly, is non-rational. And behind this kind of altruism, normally a fast follower is cynicism. And that's something you have to recognize. And it's not just the idle cynic. There are people out there looking to trip up brands, and we need to recognize that. And we need to manage for it. Microsoft did a great job when they launched the Kinect product. Well, they almost didn't do a great job, because it was immediately hacked by developers and was being used in ways that they hadn't intended. And their instinct as a big corporation was to close that down. But then they suddenly thought, well, actually, aren't these the very people we want to be working with, students and developers? So they relaunched the product 3 months later with a software developer kit and made a benefit of it and made it open source. I'm sure many of you have brands for which you have a kind of disaster recovery plan. But if you're going to build trusting relationships, it's going to be what you do on your bad days, which is where the trust is built. So rather than think, if there's a crisis, we have a plan, what about looking for a few crises and managing them really well and building trust that way? So you've heard about communications and us revisiting the age-old art of communication and recognizing that it lives in different ways in the mobile phone. We've heard about brand building and said, yes, those rules are still true, but no, it's not quite as simple as that. Let's go to something finally a little bit more close to home in our last couple of minutes and think about the emerging markets. Here there's a new orthodoxy. We haven't forgotten yet, have we? It's about the next billion. It's about the bottom of the pyramid. It's about poor people being not quite so poor and buying mobile phones. That's right, isn't it?
Again, to quote you, yes and no. Yes, indeed, Africa has, we all know the numbers. Africa is a massive, in fact, the emerging markets are a massive mobile market, lots going on in that, and I'm sure a lot of you have already seen these kind of stats. In Africa at the moment, more people have access to mobile phones than actual drinking water. 62% of the people in South Africa who are accessing the internet are accessing it on their mobile phones, whereas the remaining 38% are doing it on their desktop. And even that 38%, a good number of them are accessing it on their mobile phones as well. 65% of Google searches over the weekend in South Africa are done on mobile phones. So again, it goes back even some of those 38% people who are on their desktops. But again, mobile comes with quite a few challenges along the way, because you've got to look at designing for 6,000 different types of devices. So it definitely is a very fragmented, challenging place to be. And also then comes the battle between designing native apps for smartphones and tablets versus mobile internet sites for your feature phones. There was a World Bank study that was done about a year or so ago, and apparently there's a 1.3% increase in GDP for every 10% increase in broadband connectivity. So here's an example of a fantastic brand and how they use this broadband connectivity extraordinarily well. First National Bank are a South African bank, and they've started branching out into the rest of Africa. But one of the things that they really wanted to start doing was they wanted to really differentiate themselves in a very cluttered market. We were in the middle of a recession. All the other banks were talking about how we've got better services, we've got better solutions for you, and this thing is telling me to wrap up, so I'll go as quickly as I possibly can. But essentially, the challenge for FNB was that they served two markets. They served your upper income markets, who are the guys with the smartphones and the tablets. And they also have the mass market, who are generally the unbanked, which is a massive challenge for a lot of banks in Africa. So what they essentially came up with was a two-pronged solution. The first thing they came up with was the e-wallet. Now, I'm sure a lot of you already know about M-Pesa. E-wallet works extremely similarly to that, but with just a couple of additions. So essentially what you can do with e-wallet is if I'm a First National Bank account holder, I can send money to anyone, anywhere throughout the continent, whether they've got a bank account or not. If they've got a mobile phone, I can send them money. And all I got to do is make sure that I'm punching in the right amount of the right cell phone number into my phone when I'm sending them money. They will go to a retailer, or if they've got an F&B account, they can go to an ATM. If not, they can just go to a retailer and buy using the money that I've just sent them. Very easy, very seamless way of doing things. The other thing that you can do with e-wallets as well, understanding how people use the money, what people are actually using money for. FNB realized that people's biggest issues are they're trying to get electricity into their homes, and a lot of people in South Africa use prepaid electricity if they do have access to it, to the electricity in terms of the mass market. They play lotto a lot. They're buying cell phone airtime. So instead of having people have to go to the nearest store, which in a lot of times is, if you're living in a rural area, extremely far away, why not just make it easy for me to do it right there on my mobile phone? So I can literally buy electricity right there on my mobile phone and then put the code straight into my prepaid box, and I'm good to go. And I didn't even have to leave my home, or from somebody sending me some money. So again, a brand that really understands what technology is, how people are using it, and what we can do in terms of making sure that we are offering them these kind of great solutions. Then they went across to the upper end of the market, and these are the guys with the smartphones and the phone tablets. And what they created here was an FNB banking app. And really, this was something that you can download onto your iPhone, onto your smartphone, onto your tablet. But here's the problem. Penetration of smartphones in South Africa is quite low. So it's one thing for us to create these incredible solutions and these credible FNB apps and all of that, but if people don't have the smartphones in their hands, what's the point? So they decided, well, let's put the smartphones in their hands. So what they did was that they came up with an offer where if you signed up to a gold or platinum check account, you would then be eligible to be given an iPad or a smartphone, and you would pay for it over a 24-month period with no credit. And you were actually paying less than retail at most other places. No brainer for a lot of people. They decided, why not? So people started signing up for check accounts, for gold and platinum check accounts en masse. In fact, FNB had an 18% increase in 6 months in terms of the number of people who were actually signing up for these accounts. So they had a business imperative where we need to start increasing the number of people that are signing up to our accounts, but we need to do that by delivering some real value. As a result of this, they've actually become the single largest distributor of iPads in South Africa. They distributed 50,000 iPads in the last 6 months. So a bank that really understands what people are doing with technology and created solutions for them. So at the end of the day, what FNB really is a fantastic example of a malleable brand. It's a brand that understands what people are doing with technology, what we can do in terms of changing our business model. Incidentally, the other thing that they've done as well is that they've created an internet service provider called FNB Connect. So when you sign up to an FNB account, you can then sign up to an FNB Connect ADSL line, and you get all these kinds of benefits as well. And they link that back to their FNB online banking product as well. So all of these different business units that they've literally started opening in and around their business, linking back to their core business of banking, but adding real value to their customers by understanding what their customers are using all of this new technology for.
So I think we've seen that digital's a big path to growth, bringing this back to growth in lots of different ways. There are some old things we knew which perhaps we need to look at again, revisit, perhaps change some of the rules, or perhaps reinterpret them. I think, though, coming back to the art of growth, when we look at what digital and mobile have done to consumers, it means that all the details of communication and brand building, they've never been more important. How we use non-verbal cues, how we use tone of voice, how we co-create effectively, really thinking, if we want to build brands that are trusted, what does it take to build trust? How can we exploit the unexpected? And we've seen with the FNB example, a great example that the emerging markets are not just playing catch-up, they're a place to look to for innovation and inspiration in people's quest for growth. So thanks, Sifiso, and thanks everybody for listening.